You guys ready? I'm ready. Good morning. I'm Diane Fraiman, Managing Director of Voyager Capital here in Portland, and I want to welcome you to a conversation this morning that I'm very excited to have around the state of retained or executive search. I have two very good friends of Voyager with me this morning who are experts in the field, Kernan and Mike Doonan. Since 2016, Kevin's been a partner with JM Search and is Seattle-based. Kevin brings 25 years of operational leadership experience within the technology sector to JM Search. Mike Doonan is the managing partner at SPMB in San Francisco. Mike was recruited to SPMB in 2004 to help evolve the firm's business model, which meant redeveloping and implementing the company's entire search strategy. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go forward this morning. Both Kevin and Mike have done dozens of executive searches for Voyager portfolio companies across all functions of the organization, and we thank them for their partnership, for their friendship, and especially for being with us here today. Over the next 35 to 40 minutes, we plan to discuss 4 key areas of the changing marketplace through the eyes of a retained search expert. The reason this is of such interest to me is that you guys, Kevin and Mike, you're in the middle of a fascinating intersection of the changing corporate world. As someone who believes personally that the way to the money is through the people, your focus on getting the right people into the right positions in companies is at the heart of success. And so the 4 areas I'd like to dive into this morning are, number 1, as we know where we need to start, the past year, the COVID disruption. What's it been like from your viewpoint and from the viewpoint of the companies that you're working with? That'll move us into what I'll call the new normal. What's your opinion around where we go from now, the future of work, what that looks like from a hiring perspective, work from home, distributed teams, and of course, that'll get us into this area of diversity and equity. Every company that I know is now fully aware of the importance of a diverse organization. Has the past year of COVID and Black Lives Matter, has that accelerated this focus? Where has it taken it? And then finally, I'd like to end up with technology in the search business. Both the recruitment technology that you use now, as well as technology that may be disrupting the business and replacing you in some markets. During the discussion, for all of you that are listening, feel free to use the chat function to ask questions, and I'll get to them as appropriate at the end or during the conversation this morning. And so let's get started. For Voyager, just after finalizing the 2020 plans with our portfolio companies came the lockdown. And after the initial shock of the lockdown and reevaluating all those plans, we sort of realized, lo and behold, who knew you could do business this way? And so by the summer, we actually saw many of our portfolio companies accelerating growth, which really meant hiring in a pandemic. So Kevin, I'm going to start with you and throw it over to you. Start at a high level as to how's the last year been? Did your business slow, grow, change? What were the surprises along the way? And then we'll jump to Mike. And again, I hope that this can be open and conversational. So Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for inviting me to participate, and great to be on the panel here with you, Mike, as well. Tumultuous is a word that comes to mind in terms of the last year, but there's actually some similarities at the beginning of the pandemic to what we faced with the economic crash in 2008. I think it really forced a change in leadership style, a change in leadership scope. It really forced and exposed whether or not leaders had the breadth of dynamic range, if you will. But I would say that Q2 in the search business was a little scary. Leaders were focused on quickly pivoting to work from home. I mean, we all know what we went through, making the necessary IT changes to support that, dealing with security, in many cases, dealing with a young workforce that, 2 folks working at home with kids, and it was just very disruptive. And I'll go back to tumultuous. I would say that it was about the August timeframe that we really saw the business recover. Got off to a great start in Q1. Q2, we wondered if executive search was ever going to exist again. Q3 really started to pick up. And then I think pent-up demand kicked in hard towards the back end of the year, and frankly has continued into 21. So I don't know, Mike, please share with us your experience and your thoughts.
Yeah, very similar. Q1 was great. Q2 was an existential crisis. We didn't know if we were going to be here to have this conversation today, and it's probably similar to anyone in a professional services industry. It's a very uncomfortable position to be in when, specifically in search, we talk about we go out of business every 90 days based on the way that we're paid in the retainer model, yet we have long-term commitments to clients. And how do you think about that? How do you get through it? How do you plan for it? And I think in search, it's probably played out in a similar way as it did in the market, where companies either decide to cut fast and deep, they sit on the sidelines and hang out, or they do something like a land grab. And we sort of decided to do a combination of 2 and 3, maybe because we're not great business people. We saw everyone go and just cut deep. But at our firm, we've all been working together for 10, 20, sometimes more than 20 years. And we as owners said, let's put money into the company in the next 6 months so we don't have to think about this and just focus on clients and our people. And we're either going to go personally bankrupt or we're going to get something out of it. And the thing that happened was we were able to attract people to our company that we probably would never have been able to get in a normal climate, because specifically the larger companies, they didn't get rid of partners or revenue. They got rid of the cost, which is the mid to lower level people, the research people, which Kevin and I have similar philosophies on. Search is it's the key to your business. So we were able to actually build during that time period, and it sort of worked out. It was a big part of luck, but
did it mean some different relationships with your clients? Did the tone of the relationship, or did the immediate crisis form different relationships with your clients during this period?
Yeah, I mean, they were coming to us looking for advice, and the first thing you say is, well, this is my first global pandemic too, so I don't know how to answer that directly, but I think they just needed to feel like we were in it with them for the long term. And the roles changed. It was going into Q2, it was grow, and then it was bring in management that can weather the storm, which is a different personality, a different DNA strand than the candidate you were looking for, which was who's taken 4 companies IPO in the last 5 years. That wasn't the exercise. The exercise was business rationalization and are we in the right business? How do we pivot? It's a different person.
Right.
Yeah, I would say it exposed leaders that looked better than they might have actually been.
Yes.
Right. Because we were in high growth mode in 19, and I think everybody exited 19 and moved into Q1 of 20 in a state of euphoria.
21.
But similar to what Mike and his firm had done, we were very fortunate. We didn't have layoffs. We didn't have salary cuts. We ended up hiring 17 people in 2020. So we were able to take advantage, as Mike's firm was as well, of the environment to a large extent.
And there are,
I'm sorry, Mike.
There are certain businesses. I mean, it could be easier for us to say, hey, go hire people, because that's our business. There were businesses. I had 2 clients when the whole thing started that were in entertainment technology. One was tied to live events and going up and to the right. Basically it didn't go out of business, but went from doing very, very well to no revenue the next day. The other one was a live streaming service that is now 100 million users that is one of the more successful companies around. Both were probably equally attractive to the candidate community in Q1 and dramatically different in Q2. We were talking to the same candidate base for both searches, and it was interesting how that played out. the companies that did have an opportunity to do well in COVID, the story to them was, now could be a great time to pick up the talent that you were never able to get before. And that's why it reflects our business a little bit. The live events technology company is a great company. It just wrong place, wrong time. And you can, a lot of clients pick those people up. We were getting phone calls from candidates that have never looked for a role in their life, and sometimes never had called us back saying, I don't know how to do this.
Right.
Do I talk to you? Trip Actions is a good example. They built a dream team. I mean, these are in every function, and one day they were just gone. So that was an opportunity for other companies to get exposure to people that maybe they couldn't in a normal environment.
You guys swooped in and basically took the talent, which is obviously what your job is. And so now the good news is there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? I mean, I think we're all beginning to feel optimistic, not only because of just the state of coming out of COVID, but just the whole environment's beginning to feel more optimistic. And what we're seeing in our portfolio companies, of course, is a rebalancing of the talent pool, as well as a hiring surge that's going on in many of our companies. And so let's transition a little bit and spend some more time now into, so here we are, right? I think there's a level of optimism. There is clearly a new year going forward here. What are you seeing? How have we come into this new year? What are the key challenges that you now face? I mean, I would imagine some of it may be talent. But I'm interested now that we are where we are, especially given that many folks on this call are CEOs of portfolio companies looking for advice. I mean, Mike, where do you see us standing now? What's going on?
I mean, things have come rushing back. It's almost like all of the decisions that were not made last year all need to be made in a very short period of time in 2021. Like Kevin said, it's very similar to 08, 09, where there weren't many people hiring revenue generating roles during that time. They were focused on building product and development teams. And now it's all about go to market, with the exception of data roles and security are also just kind of white hot. The thing that I think clients need to pay attention to is while their behavior is back to normal, the candidate behavior isn't really what it was in 2019. Because if you think about things like candidate accessibility, people are at home. They don't need to pretend to go take a smoke break to talk to me in the middle of the day, right? So you could argue that's a good thing, but it also means that they're taking that many more phone calls from other recruiters. And how do we go about changing our approach to that to make sure that we really have their interest? And then the downstream elements that could be positive and could be landmines around, I call it candidate shelf life. Like if I talk to somebody, it used to be I have 35 days to whether or not that person's going to be butt in seat in the company. Otherwise, they've done something different. They've either chosen to go elsewhere, they've stayed at their company, the client has decided they're not right. All those numbers have come down, I think, because of accessibility. Now it's like 27, 28 days. And you have to coach a client to say, think about the world 4 weeks from now, and this person's here, and let's work our process backwards. Not to put pressure on you, but I don't want you to be surprised if this person evaporates when they're at the 5-yard line.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Kevin, what about you?
Yeah, I would. I don't want to parrot what Mike said necessarily, but shelf life has definitely changed, especially in these go-to-market roles, sales leadership positions specifically. Whereas, Mike, you had mentioned 27 days. That I don't disagree with that, but that might even be a stretch. So I do encourage any hiring executive, especially in the go-to-market positions, to make sure you work with your search consultant up front to establish a process that can move very, very quickly.
Is Kevin, I mean, is talking about this process, I mean, it's going faster, it's different. is relocation a thing of the past? Is remote working and work from home where we're gonna be? Is that what you're seeing is expected from the candidates themselves? Is that what is built into the thinking of the CEOs? You know, what of this change is going to stick, and how is that affecting this whole process?
I would say my perspective is we will be in a work from home or hybrid model, could be for the next couple of years. Now, people are anxious to return to offices for a lot of good reasons, but most CEOs and boards that I am speaking with have said we will be in a work from home model through 21 and will begin a hybrid model in 22. Most are very open to not asking candidates to reload and or adding that we may want you to reload to headquarters, but it won't be before some point in 22.
I'd say relocation is becoming more of a benefit than a requirement.
Interesting.
We'll support you if and when we both decide that it's the right thing to do, but at the moment, let's just take it off the table. I think that happened faster than I expected. It happened 4 to 6 weeks into COVID, and people were having that conversation. I thought that was going to slow everything down. The other gotcha that companies should pay attention to is as we track data in the workflow of a search, we're finding that candidates are pulling out at the tail end of a search more than they ever had before. And I don't like surprises, and I assume my clients don't like surprises, and we do everything in our body to make sure that doesn't happen. But during COVID, leading even up to now, that's happened more than ever before. And I think the companies that have overcome that have rethought the way that they engage. They've become less formal. You got to be careful of how search people love processes. We have religious debates on how this should work, but encouraging and allowing the CEO, founder, management team to reach out less formally to a candidate by phone or text, I think that's enabling them to create the personal relationships that were created in a normal search process pre-COVID, where you went to dinner and you met spouses and you did all these things. I don't think they feel if you pull out of a search process pre-COVID at the 1 yard line, you're in trouble, right? Like that gets around. I don't think they feel that level of commitment that they did before.
Yeah, I mean, so that's interesting, and that is, as you said, it used to be that you flew them to the headquarters and they met everybody face to face, and that all goes away now. I mean, so is it harder for you? Is the talent pool therefore harder for you to attract? Is it just more agile in terms of the number of deals that they're looking at, and therefore they have more choice? I mean, how has your ability to maintain that relationship changed during this, or what are you doing, in fact, to not have it change from the way that you used to go about things?
I think a lot of it comes down to simple relationships that you've had for a very long period of time and treating people well.
As it always has been.
Yeah, and we'll get to technology and search, but in an up market, when there's a lot of money and there are tools such as LinkedIn, everybody's a search person. Lee Schweiker, who started our firm, told me all you need is a roll of quarters and a phone book and you're in search. And to some degree, that's true. Now you just need a LinkedIn account. So there's a lot more noise. And you'll talk to people that say, I have 15 voicemails in my phone. I plan to maybe return one of them. Right. And by the way, they're all unicorns that are backed by tier 1 VCs, and the pitch is all the same. I'm really calling back the person that I trust, that I think will treat me well, and is probably generally associated with good deals over a period of time. That's what I'm hearing, although maybe they're telling that to the other 14 people in their voicemail.
So, I mean, Kevin, to this point, I mean, listen, talent is the business that you're in. I'm curious, at the end of the day, you're now seeing a virtual talent pool and a virtual hiring environment. We've got folks speaking for my companies here in Portland or the Pacific Northwest that are now able to hire folks from anywhere. And if relocation is a thing of the past, and it's going to stay this way for a little while, distributed teams, which used to just be for engineering, now actually for the first time in my career are also true for marketing and other go-to-market functions. You know, how is a CEO, how is a hiring manager supposed to start to look at the balance between I can hire from anywhere, but the expectations on comp is been equalized now. There's no benefit to running a company in Portland and getting the advantage of some of those comp ranges, et cetera. How are you advising companies? Are you seeing that? How does this begin to play out as we go forward?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that will persist into the future that COVID has really forced us into as search executive is frankly being more consultative, both with candidates and with clients. And I think to a point, just real quick, that Mike was making earlier, I just wanted to expand on it, that surrounding the candidate more effectively by virtue of that informal touch becomes far more important. Zoom has become a great equalizer. I think
I'm hating it myself, but I mean,
no, look, I'm not saying, I didn't say I loved it.
Yeah.
I said it's become a bit of an equalizer in the sense that we can all recall days when there were folks in a conference room and we're the one person dialed in, right? Well, you're not really in the meeting. You know, today with Zoom, it is that equalizer. But to your question on comp, I think that what we're finding is that we're having to rely more heavily on our own comp data because we're finding that some of the compensation study details are actually out of date by the time they get in the hands of CEOs or HR professionals because that demand is so high. And that would be specific, as Mike, I think, touched on earlier, healthcare sector, cybersecurity, are just two examples of that where they're just white hot right at the moment. So I would encourage hiring executives to press on their search partners to provide compensation data directly from the search organization real time based on placements we are making, you know, today, yesterday, last week, because we have that information and it's very valuable.
So are you finding though, Kevin, that when a CEO comes to you with a search that they want to do and they basically, you get into the whole issue of comp, are you consistently now having to push back and say, listen, that's just not realistic anymore? I mean, is it a real, you know, training and advisory service that you need to provide to these hiring CEOs that basically makes it clear to them that, you know, the days of where you thought that there was an advantage because of location are gone? And other than giving them those surveys, that you're really having to help them through this process?
I think it's a discussion around what the ranges are and essentially what you can afford versus what talent is available in the market. And as Mike or anybody in the business would know, the market will dictate what the compensation structure will be for the talent that you're seeking. I'm just trying to open the minds of the hiring executives a bit to say, you're going to have to show a little bit of flexibility, but the market will tell us, and it will tell us very quickly. Within a week to 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, we're going to know exactly what that compensation range will be.
Well, and if you take the fact that these searches have gone down to on average 27 days, you'll know really fast, right? I mean, this is no longer a matter of, you know, having 90 days to try and figure this out. I mean, you've got to be agile enough to do it very quickly.
Yeah, and I think one of the benefits of this has been a reduction in the number of days to close searches. For us, it's been almost a 20%. Mike, you've probably seen the same thing. The downside is that, to the point about losing candidates late in the process, you better have a backup.
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing that as well. So let's move a little bit into, you know, what really is one of the hottest areas of discussion that I know we're having with all of our portfolio companies, and that is a desire for a more diverse organization. And that I think that you're both seeing now requests especially in the senior levels, to hire a diverse or get a diverse pool of talent for certain organizations. So I'm curious, just at a high level, we know that progressive companies for a long time have seen the value of this. I think that it's now become front and center, both in terms of the value of a diverse organization and the importance of a diverse organization. How has that affected both your ability to find the talent that you're looking for, as well as the conversations that you're having with your clients? Mike, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think the events of the last year have brought the topic to the forefront, but in reality, it's always having a diverse slate of candidates to put in front of your client has always been a requirement. And I'd say maybe less so in the Bay Area years ago. Now it's every conversation you have, but Kevin and I do work in other areas. I feel like the conversation started earlier in some of these other geographies and has now come running very much to these tech centers, which have been generally homogenous for a very long period of time. What we're pushing our clients on, and this sounds obvious, but it doesn't always play out this way, is hiring for experience versus hiring for ability. And especially in venture, right? You're a venture-backed company because you're doing something probably that no one's ever done before, and you're in a very unique situation that requires a very unique skill set. And the Venn diagram, when you start putting bubbles together, there's not a lot of overlap, and really paying attention to the population of people that could do the job that maybe don't check every one of the formal boxes has become so important.
So are you seeing the talent though? I mean, Kevin, are you, and I know that we've had experience together on this where there was, very clear requests that there be a person of color in a specific C-level role. And it was a very narrow request. And I think that it took longer to find that candidate. Is the talent pool there to help meet some of these new demands?
I would say it is, but from a search perspective, it does really force you to focus on your research strategy and really work closely as a team with your client to make sure that you're not only finding the right people with the right mix of skills. I'll call it personal characteristics, aptitude, skills, knowledge, and experience. I mean, those 5 things are critical. Is the talent there? Yes, I would say the talent is there. Does it require, a deeper reach? In some cases it does. Does that take more time? Often it does take a bit more time.
But not having to relocate must help, right? I mean, going back
not
to
having to relocate is huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it does take a little bit more time. The talent is there. The talent is available. The availability is the question, right? Can you extract that ideal person from what they're already engaged in? And given the emphasis on diverse talent in our leadership teams and across our client companies, the volume of inquiry and the volume of request that talent base is getting is astronomical.
Yeah.
So it's really critical to not only have a mapping of those capabilities of your requirements to the capabilities of the individual, but be able to uniquely articulate the value of the investor, of the management team, the sector, the ability to win and be successful. You've got to have that story down.
Right. I that makes a lot of sense to me as well. And then there's the issue of women in the workplace, right? I mean,
digging into something Kevin mentioned that I think is important. You're talking about research, and it's creative research. It's figuring out CFO is probably the easiest one. Everyone wants a CFO that's taken a company public. When you look at, we did a little study once, you look at the CFOs that have taken company public, they generally fall into two categories. They're the CFOs who come in at the last minute to make Wall Street feel comfortable, to take the company out. And then there's a pool, and this is the more successful pool. There are first-time CFOs. They were number twos at other companies. And they were actually the people that were doing all the work to take the company public for the person that showed up at the last minute, and being able to show, and that's the same thing in every function. When you go that one level deeper, that's where you have a larger pool of very, very high quality people that have often been overlooked. And when you're working directly with a CEO, the CEO usually gets it, right? But it's when you get to the final round and you go to the board, or you go to some other committee that says, well, you have two candidates, you have three candidates, these two took the company public, this one didn't, they automatically, they haven't been through the journey. So you have to educate them on, often the person that has the ability, but maybe hasn't checked that box, might be the better long-term player.
Those damn boards.
It's all you.
So jumping to the question around women in the workplace, I mean, as we know, that took one of the biggest hits this last year for all the reasons that we can discuss. Do you see women jumping back in? Do you see them coming back in quickly? Do you think it's going to take a while before we get women coming back into the workforce at the same numbers? Kevin?
I would say absolutely see women jumping back in. I do think it will take time. And I actually think it will take 2 to 3 years.
Do you really?
I do. We, as Mike does, I'm sure, we do a lot of measuring and capture a lot of data. It's going to be interesting to see what the numbers look like in 2021, but in 2020, 27% of the placements that we did were diverse placements, 57% in HR and HR related functions. And I'll be very anxious to see what those numbers look like. We'll look at that mid-year. And again, at the end of the year, I'll be very anxious. But I think the general consensus is that yes, women are jumping back into the workplace. Actually, probably more so in senior level roles than mid or junior level roles. But it's going to take, in order for it to normalize to the, I would say, the track we were on in 19 and early 20, general view is amongst our group, that's probably 2 or 3 years.
Wow, that's something. Mike, what are you seeing?
I agree, and our statistics track almost exactly to what Kevin's mentioning.
Yeah.
The good thing that we've seen is, since I think it's 2017, the person that actually, there's a diverse slate of candidates that you bring to a client who ultimately gets hired. The person that is ultimately hired 3 times more than in 2017 is a diverse candidate, which is really nice to see, and hopefully that trend continues.
Yeah, I agree. Surprising that it's going to take, listen, I mean, we're still not there, so it's I guess not so surprising it's going to take that long, but let's hope it goes quicker. Let's move to the final topic around recruitment technology. The recruitment industry, you guys are not known as early adopters of technology for the most part. And yet we, Voyager, have seen in the last 6 to 12 months an increasing number of recruitment technology plays. Some of them where you're the economic buyer, and many of them where the HR or the internal hiring exec is the economic buyer, disrupting you guys. So I'm curious to see what your observation has been around this. And Mike, of course, part of this is you came in 2004 to SPMB and were asked to overhaul things. If you were to come in 2021 and asked to do that, what are you seeing? What would you do differently? How is technology playing into your world of doing your business today? And then I'd also like to jump to where it's disrupting your business by going directly in-house.
Sure. So Lee Schweikler, who started our firm, was a family friend. I was doing investment banking at the time, and he explained to me how search worked. And it was mind-blowing because it felt like you have this very sophisticated client base, which is the investment community, is your channel to market to companies for the most part. And you've got this database of names and they've got a bucket of money and you change hands. And that was just, the lack of transparency in the business was shocking. And that's actually what attracted me to the business in the first place. So the whole goal, when I first joined, was to try to, keep it very white glove as Lee wanted, but to remove the black box of search. I think technology has helped us in that journey. The problem is executive search, I don't believe, is a big enough market to attract companies to develop products for us. So every interesting product that comes along is an ATS system where we don't need 90% of the
Right.
functionality. We've been working with one company where we are actually their virtual product management organization, and they'll build what we want. We don't want to be a software company. And that's worked well. I think there's a transparency component, and then there's the data component, and your ability to not do what recruiters do and say, hey, I just did the search. I'll start at A and go to Z and call all these names, and the answer is at Q, and it takes you 2 months to get to Q, and we get paid for our time, so we're losing money, and the client's pissed off. Like, how do you?
I mean, but this whole thing is about either shortening the sales cycle or reducing the operating costs. I mean, it's the same thing for any kind of product. And so most of what we're seeing is one of those two things, right? It helps to shorten the access to talent for a lower price, right? And which is highly disruptive to both your market and to the cost to the CEO, to the corporation.
But to a point earlier, they're still calling me and Kevin. They're not calling, a deal. Like, all the deals still sound exactly the same. That's what we're hearing from the candidate community. And anyone can get a LinkedIn account, and anyone can contact somebody, and anyone can get a client. But and I do think there's more competition, and the exercise, which is frustrating, is getting through the noise as opposed to performing a really good search. COVID has, just like 2008-9, COVID has been a good thing in my mind to search, because a lot of the competition has disappeared. I don't know where they go, and I'm sure they'll come back. But a lot of what we call, the ankle biters who will discount fees, and they've disappeared, which is nice.
They're gone. Kevin, what are you seeing? Both in terms of what you're using as well as what's disrupting how you do business?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm old enough to say I lived through the migration from waterfall to iterative development. And I think search has gone through a similar evolution in the last 3 to 5 years. And I think you mentioned a couple of dimensions of it, Diane, but I also think quality is a key factor that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think the tighter, these are relationships where you have to be able to go, with all due respect, from zero to intimate very fast with your client, with candidates, and the faster and the more effectively you can iterate with your client on the requirements, on the candidate profiles, on those that they're interested in, on the interview process, the better off the result will be, and the sooner you will get to it. Technology, as it impacts our business, as you said, we're not early adopters. We think a portal that gives clients real-time access to candidate data is a great thing.
Right. So the net on that, Kevin, is if you're building a recruitment technology platform and you think that the search organizations are going to be your marketplace, maybe it's not such a good idea.
Well, it may be at some point. I think if you look at the lower end of, I'll call it staffing, we're starting to see some application of AI and machine learning. Yep. But if you look at top end executive retained search, I would say AI and machine learning is still a solution looking for a problem. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. Are we all investigating that? And are we looking for the day when I can drop a requirements document into an analytics stack and have it spit out the dozen best candidates who are available? Yes.
Okay, so if
will
anyone's
include-
listening, that's what they should be building, right? That, there you got it.
I
From
was
the
in software
horse.
development for 25 years. Do you think I don't think about that?
Well, never say never. Never say never. A couple of questions. I'll take the first one that actually is on the chat, and I've got several others here. We talked about this a little bit before, but the question I asked before, is relocation a thing of the past? I mean, are you basically removing location completely from the criteria of hiring and let's take for the senior levels right now, is that a requirement that you just basically are recommending you have to remove?
I think it depends on the role. For the more technical roles, when you start getting into
They've always
product,
been distributed. Yeah.
yeah, and people are operating in a distributed environment right now, but I think that no one's come up with a good enough whiteboarding technology. That's the other idea I'd throw out there. If somebody can
There you go.
great whiteboard, virtual whiteboard, roles where that is important, it's still hard to have those roles outside of headquarters. The go-to-market roles, sales is obvious, marketing is something that I see loosening up quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I'm seeing that as well. And we've talked about it internally. I mean, where I thought marketing was the last bastion of centralization for an organization, and personally always felt important about that myself. We're seeing that for the first time ever blow up. That you find a good demand gen person and they're sitting somewhere else, it's okay. You find a good product marketing person and they're sitting, it's okay, because the talent pool is so competitive that, we're really beginning to see that location is becoming pretty much a secondary part of the whole conversation. Kevin, you agree?
Yeah, I do. I would say, and we went through this as a team, about 75% of the searches that we're doing at this point, location is essentially off the table.
Yeah, it's off the table.
And yes, it does get partitioned into roles the way Mike defined them, but roughly speaking, we would say as a group, it's about 75% of the projects, location.
It's gone. I think we're seeing the same thing. How are you preparing candidates for remote interviews? Are you having to, going back to this issue of, Zoom is this, who knew you could do business this way? Are you having to coach your candidates as to how to interview over Zoom or remotely do interviews? Is this something that is sort of new to your coaching of candidates and hiring execs?
I would say we were coaching them a lot more in Q2 and Q3 than we are today.
Okay. Become more ready. Yeah.
Back just real quick, back to a comment we made earlier that kind of encircling the candidate in terms of making sure they're gaining access to demos and getting the right level of detail on the company. And we're probably providing more information to the candidate today, be it under NDA or not, than we might have been earlier when there were more live face-to-face meetings.
Right. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And then just to sort of get to a wrap up here at the more technical aspects of your business, fees for your business used to be based on a percentage of compensation of first year comp. And as we talked about before, fees are comp is going up because it's equalizing because of this geography conversation. And yet your fees have stayed sort of flat. What's going on and how you're running your business? Is this based on competition? Is this just a lag that things are going to change? What's really going on in terms of the hiring CEOs, understanding how to negotiate their rates with you, and what really is the levers that are going on and where they may change? Mike?
Yeah, so the structure of our fees have stayed the same in terms of a percentage of first year cash. Comp packages have gone up. I mean, when we look at fees, and we're trying to do the right thing by our clients, but we're also running into the same challenges they are in terms of our costs are going up. I can't tell you our biggest competition, given we have offices around it, our headquarters being in San Francisco, and having a young employee base. You can see Google, Facebook, Apple, calling our people saying, how much do you make? I'll pay you double if you're here tomorrow. Yeah. And we just can't compete with that. And we don't we don't want to. And sometimes these people go there for 2 years and come back. But we'll see what happens with real estate and the other elements of the costs that go into producing the service. But from a structural standpoint, they haven't changed.
Yeah. Kevin, I mean, does the 1 year guarantee work? Are you taking more equity as part of the plan? What's the mix on this? What does it look like to you?
We typically have not taken equity in lieu of a fee. And I would agree with Mike that our fee structure has not changed really since I've been in search. I think there's more emphasis. It's interesting. I moved from the East Coast 5 years ago to Seattle, and and had been doing search on the West Coast. There tends to be more pressure on capping search fees at a certain amount. Still a third, but capping it at a third, or capping, the fee structure. I see that more so on the West Coast than I do on the East, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say fundamentally the fees have not changed dramatically. I think we'd actually look at our fees overall as a firm and say the average fees have probably ticked up. And that's likely a result of doing work at a more senior level as we're growing and developing the firm.
Are you seeing the compensation bands very different across regions? And as you guys know, we're up in Canada as well. In Western Canada, are you seeing, even though things are equalizing, are you still seeing much of a difference across regions in the compensation bands?
Less than you'd expect.
Yeah, and smaller and smaller is what we see.
I think as time goes on, and like literally month by month, it's equalizing at a faster pace. Mm-hmm. You used to say, let's get a head of X in a low cost area, and we're going to give up the requirement to relo, and that was a big deal to the company. They thought the candidate should be thankful, and the candidate's saying, I'm paid the same as my peers, so I don't agree with your philosophy, and that's just is what it is.
Yeah.
I think there's two dimensions to leveling there, Diane. One is, to Mike's point, in terms of geographic pay equity, but I also think there's gender pay equity at work here as well. And I actually think the events of the last 9 months and this whole location issue plays into improving pay equity across the board.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing as well. So the final question to both of you is, for our listening audience, what's the one tip or trick that you can give to a hiring CEO right now to get your attention to do a search for them? I mean, we understand that you have a lot of choice of who you work with, and sitting on the other end of this, we also know that you say no to opportunities as well as jumping at saying yes. What's the little tip or trick that makes a phone call that you get from a company that maybe you've never worked with before to get your interest to do a search for especially in the go-to-market stage? I think that right now everyone's hiring go-to-market leadership, and what we're finding is that there's as much an often amount of time of a no. We can't get to you for 90 days. We can't do that as we just had an opening. We're happy to take your search. Can you take us behind the curtain a little bit and tell us what we can do to increase the odds of you saying yes? Mike?
Man, play to my ego. I don't know. No, I think when you've done this a long time, I mean, it's just search has evolved. Search, I believe, was more of a consultative business back in the day, and part of its competition is it feels like it's become a bit of a lead generation game, which is a commodity business and a race to the bottom, which is something that's just not interesting. At the end of the day, there's a button, a seat, so there's a funnel. But the clients that I work with the best and that I enjoy working with are the ones that come early before there's ever a search and say, here's the problem I'm trying to solve as a business, and I don't know how to get there, and I have some ideas, and can I bounce them off you? And we construct the roles together, and it's you get into you get to the right answer in a just more meaningful way, as opposed to, I wrote this spec and go, I'm going to shop it around to 6 firms, and whoever tells me what I want to hear is going to get it. That's it just doesn't feel like you're doing the right thing for your client. Like they're incentivizing you to do the wrong thing, not to help them, but to win a deal. So
that's
really good advice, Mike. Kevin, what about from your standpoint?
Yeah, I would agree with what Mike said. I think I think that approach does allow you to get to that level of intimacy, understand the culture, understand the decision-making chemistry on the leadership team. I think the searches that run most effectively are the ones where the hiring executives are deeply engaged from day one. Don't outsource this to others in the organization. The hiring manager needs to be actively engaged throughout the process, and provide near immediate feedback, whether it's requirements, candidate profiles, candidate qualifications. And I think that's what makes this an exciting and fun business for Mike and I and others in search and doing what we do. Well, we are extremely appreciative of the partnership that you guys have always shown to Voyager and our portfolio companies, and not that you've ever said no to us on any request, and we appreciate that tremendously. But I want to thank you both for spending the last 50 minutes or so with us and with our team that is listening on today. I'm sure that there'll be follow-up from many of them. In the meantime, I know I've learned a little bit. I want to thank the two of you. I'm sure we'll be talking soon. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who participated, and thanks for the two of you for spending the time today. Bye-bye.
Great. Everybody.